Well, hello and welcome to Restoration Church. My name is Andrew. I'm the student ministries pastor here. And man, I'm just excited to be able to preach for you guys today. So, I want to kind of start out by asking you a question. And that question is this: have you ever had a day that started out ordinary but became anything but as it went on? Well, for me, I had an experience that was kind of like this, probably around the time I was 13 or 12 or 13, maybe 14 years old. It was summer vacation, and I spent a lot of my summer vacations before I could get a job being generally pretty lazy. I would often just hang out, wouldn't do much, and so I'd play video games, hang out with friends, the few friends I did have, but I didn't do all that much. And so I expected this day, it was a random day in the middle of the week, to be ordinary and like any other day. And it started out that way until one of my friends drove to my house on a moped. Now, I was super excited because my friend's brother had been fixing up the moped and kind of gave it to him, said he was just fixing it for fun, and my friend could do whatever he wanted with it. So he brought it over to my house, and we were pumped because being like 13 years old, not having a driver's license or anything yet, and having your own motorized vehicle that you could drive up and down the street and around the block, man, I was excited. So we quickly started taking turns driving up and down the street, around the block, having fun, doing all that. But we quickly realized it was really boring for the person who was just watching. Because you got to watch your friend have fun and you did nothing. So we're like, we need to think of something to make this more fun for the other person. So we had this brilliant idea where we looked at each other and we said, hey, you know what's really fun? When it's wintertime and you have a snowmobile and you tie a sled to the back of it and you pull someone around. We were like, let's do that, but with our moped. And instead of being smart and getting a skateboard, we literally got a sled meant for winter and tied it to the back of the moped and started pulling each other around. And it worked well, except for the fact that the friction would get so hot we started getting burned as we would ride on it. And so we put a pillow in it and we began going up and down the street, and it was working pretty well. We pushed this moped to its limit. It could go 10, 15 miles per hour with us pulling the other person behind it. And my friend, who's a little bit more of a risk taker, was like, hey, let's try something fun. I'm going to jump the curb, and then I'll have you come behind me. We'll speed up, go really fast. We'll get to the end of the street. I'll stop, do a hairpin turn, and then you'll drift out behind me, and then I'll gun it and go the other way. And I was like, yeah, that sounds, nothing could go wrong. This is brilliant. So we start going, and as he's going, he jumps the curb, and as soon as I hit the curb on the sled, I flip out of it. And I fall into the grass, so I'm okay, everything's fine. I'm laughing, but I look at my friend and I realize he doesn't know that I fell off the back. And so I'm watching the sled bounce around like some horrible kite following this moped going 15 miles an hour down the road. And he gets to the end of the street and he does the hairpin turn, not realizing that the sled's not going to slide out, and it wraps itself around a stop sign, and he doesn't know. And so he guns it and starts going as fast as he can, gets about 15 feet, and the moped stops going 10 miles per hour, but he does not. And I watch him fly over the handlebars, fall onto the concrete, and I run over to check on my friend. He's laying there and he's all beat up and he can't breathe because it knocked the wind out of him and he's got road burn. So we take him inside, and I think we ended up using duct tape to bind his wounds closed. So my day started out normal, but it ended using duct tape to close a friend's wounds. It was not what I had expected. Today we're going to be reading a story about a woman who had an ordinary day that became an extraordinary encounter with God. And so we're going to be in John chapter 4, verse 6 today. So if you want, open your Bibles and you can follow along with us. If you don't have a Bible, we would love to give you one. You can go out to our Welcome Center after service, and we'd love to hand you a Bible. Or you can download the Bible app on your phone, and you'd be able to follow along with this as well. So if you open to John chapter 4, verse 6, This is a story that's kind of famous if you read the Bible. It's called the story of the woman at the well. And so to give you some context of what's going on, Jesus is traveling, and he's traveling through a kingdom called Samaria. And in biblical times, Israel and Samaria were right next door. They were next door neighbors. And so Jesus just happened to be traveling through, and it was still a long journey, so he's pretty tired. And that's where we pick up in this story. They've been traveling for a day or two, and so Jesus is at this well, and that's where we're going to start reading. So in verse 6, it says, Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired from the long walk, sat wearily beside the well about noontime. Soon, a Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Please give me a drink." He was alone at the time because his disciples had gone into the village to buy some food. The woman was surprised, for Jews refused to have anything to do with Samaritans. She said to Jesus, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. Why are you asking me for a drink?" Jesus replied, "If only you knew the gift God had for you and who you are speaking to, you would ask me, and I would give you living water." Okay, so let's pause here and unpack some of the things that are happening, because we, 2,000 years later, don't get to fully appreciate what this passage is saying without taking some time to read it a little closer and to understand some of the context. So, something that's happening here is Jesus is speaking to a Samaritan woman. And she kind of freaks out and is like, "Why are you doing this?" And the reason is because Jewish people looked at Samaritans as kind of like second-class citizens. They looked at them as like less than people. They weren't as good as Jewish people. And so the reason they did this was because Samaritans actually used to be Jewish. They came from the same religion, the same culture, but they started intermarrying and all these other things happened, and they didn't really believe the same thing that Jewish people did. And so the Jewish people, because of this, they kind of ostracized them. They didn't want anything to do with them. So they would like shun them. And that's why if you read the story of the Good Samaritan, in that story, it's so shocking that a Samaritan is a good person, because Samaritans were all looked at as terrible people. So I tried to understand, like, what would we appreciate this as a context? How could we associate this? And the best way I could think of was like, if you were an Atlanta Falcons fan last time around the Super Bowl, you were kind of ostracized from us because we knew who the real team was. We knew who the winners were, but they didn't get it. And so they weren't allowed to participate with us in the amazingness that is the New England Patriots. So we ostracized them from our society. It's kind of like that, only except they did this in every area of their life. They refused to have anything to do with them. So this woman is taken off because Jesus is a rabbi or a teacher. He's incredibly well respected. The fact that he would lower himself to speak to a woman like this was just unheard of. It was very strange. And so in this moment, God is revealing something. Christ is revealing he doesn't care about your race, your ethnicity, your background, what you've done. And as this story goes on, we're going to find out more about this woman and that she had more things that should have kept Jesus from talking to her. But he continues to talk to her, even saying like, "Hey, God has a gift for you." A Jewish person to say that to a Samaritan was totally mind-blowing. It was not normal. And so Jesus is defying all these social norms and social constructs, and in this moment, revealing a greater truth about God. He's showing that God doesn't care about where you came from, where you're at. God always loves you, and God always has something greater for you. And so he's revealing this through speaking to this woman. Just by having a conversation with her, he's showing that he operates in a different way than anyone else in his world. And I think that's really cool. So we're going to go on and we're going to continue to read some more. And so it says in verse 11, "But sir, you don't have a rope or a bucket," she said, "and this well is very deep. Where would you get this living water? And besides, do you think you're greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us this well? How can you offer better water than he and his sons and animals enjoy?" Jesus replied, "Anyone who drinks this water will become thirsty again. But those who drink the water I give them will never be thirsty again. It becomes a fresh, bubbling spring within them, giving them eternal life." "Please, sir," the woman said, "give me this water Then I'll never be thirsty again, and I won't have to come here to get water. So one of the coolest things that we see in this verse, and I think we can appreciate this maybe, to a greater extent than people have for the past few thousand years because of the way our society is. And it's one of my favorite verses that I really want us to appreciate. She says, "Do you think that you're greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us this well? How can you offer better water than he and his sons and his animals enjoy?" And so, if you don't know who Jacob is, Jacob, he went by two names in the Bible. He went by the name of Jacob and the name of Israel. So he was the father of the entire nation of Israel. And this is where we see that Samaritans used to be Jewish. They have the same ancestors. And he was considered one of the greatest men in all of Judaism. And they're at a well that he used to feed his kids from and his animals from. And she's instantly skeptical of everything Jesus is saying. And you see it. She says, "Do you think you're better than Jacob? Do you think you're better than this?" And I think we can appreciate this because we hear it all the time in our current culture. Not in the same way, but we hear what's the next best thing. We're constantly being sold what the next best thing is. This is the greatest weight loss supplement. This is the greatest movie. This person could be the greatest leader of our nation. This toy is going to be awesome, and it's all the rage this Christmas. These fidget spinners are going to stop your children from annoying you. And none of these promises ever come true. They're never true. They're never good enough. They're always trying to sell us something greater. They're trying to sell us the next best thing. And her first reaction when Jesus comes and says this is, "What makes you so great? Why are you so amazing? What do you have that's so much different than everything else that's been tried before? What could possibly make you better?" And so Jesus doesn't just charm her with his words or give his great sales pitch. No. He begins in this next passage as we read. He demonstrates why he is different and why he is better. He says, in the next passage, it says in verse 16, "Go and get your husband," Jesus told her. "I don't have a husband," the woman replied. Jesus says, "You're right, you don't have a husband. For you have had 5 husbands, and you aren't even married to the man you're living with now. You certainly spoke the truth." "Sir," the woman said, "you must be a prophet." So in this moment, there's a lot of things going on. One, Jesus is demonstrating that he's different than everyone who came before because he knows things about her that no one else should know. No one who just met her should know these things, but he's unveiling them. And so one of the ways that he's showing he's different, you may be sitting here in church today and you may say, "Why is this church different? Why is this Jesus different? Why is this different experience? My parents forced me to go to church and all it was hypocrites and jerks and terrible people. Or I got burned by a church. Or I don't even know if I buy this religion thing. Why is this religion different?" In this moment, Jesus is demonstrating to her, "I am different, I am greater, I am bigger." And he does this by unveiling things in her life. And the things he reveals, the fact that she'd been married 5 times, was just an awful thing to be in the first century. To be married 5 times in ancient cultures was horrible. You were completely ostracized from your society. You were not allowed to participate in the normal community, especially if you're living with someone you're not married to. You were looked down upon. You would be called horrible names. People would think horrible things about you. And so one of the interesting things that we see here is when she's at the well, when this woman is standing there, she is by herself. It's just her and Jesus kind of having this interaction. And that's interesting because a lot of times if you think of like pictures you've seen from third world countries or you think of in Jewish society or in ancient cultures, women didn't often go to wells by themselves. It would be a trip that they would take with a group of people. They would take with a group of other women or they'd take with their children. And the fact that she is there alone speaks volumes of how she's viewed in her community. She's there by herself. She's been completely pushed out of society to the point that even in the ordinary things of her life, she's not allowed to have people around her. The very thing that disqualified her from being part of society is the very thing that God uses to change her life. Her day goes, imagine, put yourself in her shoes, that you have to walk to this well every single day by yourself, being reminded with every step that you take that you are not allowed to be a part of society because of all the mistakes you made in your past. All of the things you had done pushed you out, made you worthless, made you valueless. And she had this experience every day. And suddenly, this man, this Jewish man, this man who's supposed to be higher than you, supposed to be better than you, a rabbi, a teacher, it starts speaking to you. What's the worst thing that could happen when someone's finally paying attention to you? A stranger is finally paying attention to you. The worst thing that could possibly happen is he finds out about your past. He finds out who you really are. And so in this moment, Jesus says, I know who you are. I know everything about you. And I still know that God has a gift for you. So I tried to think of a way we could understand this in our world and in our society. And so I guess the best way we could kind of like maybe grip this is if, imagine you're at Starbucks, because I guess that's the closest thing we have to a watering well today. It sustains us and gives us life. You're at Starbucks and you're in line and some guy comes up and he's like, hey, would you get me a cup of coffee? And you're like, well, I don't know if I can do that. And he's like, well, listen, if you knew about me, you'd know that I have the greatest coffee on earth. You just need to drink it once, and then you'll never need coffee again. You're like, oh, that's really interesting. That's nice. And he's like, also, I know about that time when you were 5 years old and you put your little brother's hand in warm water so he would pee himself when he was going to bed. And you're like, whoa, two options here. One, you run away creeped out because this guy's clearly been stalking you. Or two, you're like, hey, he must have really good coffee if he knows that. This woman in this moment has this option where she could just like, this guy knows things about her personal life. Like, it could be scary. It could be terrifying. Like, who is this man who knows so much about her? And she has two options. One, to run in fear, or two, to say, hey, there's clearly something greater going on here. There's clearly something bigger happening. And so I remember one time when I was younger, we used to go to like my dad's work parties. So my dad's work would throw a big party around Christmas every single year. And when we'd go, like they'd rent out our whole town city hall, which sounds like a big deal, but it was a town of 7,000 people, so it wasn't that impressive. But they got this whole city hall, and they would put inflatables and stuff in there, and there was always a guy dressed up as Santa. He wasn't the real one, but he would be dressed up as Santa, and he'd be waiting there. And before we had arrived there, my dad would fill out like paperwork saying like, oh, here's all the good things all my different kids did, and here's all the bad things that they've done lately. And they would give it to the Santa before we ever arrived. And so when you're 9 years old, you stand in line for Santa, and so you're standing there, and you get up to the front, and you meet him, and he's like, oh, what's your name? And I'm like, oh, it's Andrew Zimianek, and he'd open it to my page, and he'd read, and he'd look at it, he's like, hey, Andrew, I noticed that it says that lately you've been helping your parents by watching the kids when they're not home. You've also been, you did the dishes last week. That's really good. But, it looks like you made a couple mistakes lately. You got into a fight with your mom. You beat up your brother. You really got to make sure that you're not doing this type of stuff. Like 9-year-old mind would explode when I heard these things. Like, how does he know what I've done wrong? And in that moment, instead of invalidating, making me scared, making me terrified, making me want to run away from him, in that moment, that Santa became more real to me. He became something that I could believe and trust in. And that's what this woman is experiencing in this moment. She's standing there, and all of a sudden this man is unveiling everything that disqualifies her from being a part of society. And instead of running scared, she looks at him and says, no, there's something different about this. There's something greater about this. And you might have that experience today, like you're sitting in church and you might be with a friend or with a family member, and you're terrified because there are things that are in your life that if anybody knew, it would disqualify you from even having friends. I like if people knew how often I rammed into other cars because I was annoyed when I was driving, I wouldn't be allowed to be a pastor anymore. There are things in our life that we keep hidden, that we think that we try and hide, that we try and push aside because we're scared that it's going to disqualify us from having friends and family and being a part of the church or doing anything. And it's exactly those things that God is saying, I want to take that and I want to turn that into something incredible. I want to change your life for all eternity using these things that are broken. And so this woman has this ordinary day, this ordinary experience where she's walking and she has the weight of everything she's done, and she gets there and a man promises her the next best thing, promises her something great. I can only imagine as she thought about this, one of the things she says is, please give me this water so I don't have to walk here anymore. What is she saying? She's saying, I walk here alone every day. And I'm tired. And I'm exhausted. And I want to quit. And no one loves me. I want this walk to end. And Christ is saying the very things that forced her to make this walk are the very things he is going to use to turn her life around, to change everything, to save her, to reveal to her that there is a good God who loves her, who has a gift for her. And instead of running away when he finds out all about her life or disqualifying her, he says, no, this is the very thing I'm going to use not only to change your life, but to change your community's life. So we're going to read one final verse, and this is how we're going to start to wrap up, and we're going to listen to this and listen to how God changed her life. She runs back into her town and begins to tell people about who he is. And in verse 39, it says this: many Samaritans from the village believed in Jesus because the woman had said, he told me everything I ever did. When they came out to see him, they begged him to stay in their village, so he stayed for 2 days. Long enough for many more to hear his message and believe. Did you catch what was happening there? The very thing that made her walk alone, made her walk in shame, made her leave society, is the very thing God took, God changed, and God used not only to impact her, but to change the lives of her entire community. The very worst thing you could be in this society. Divorced 5 times, living with someone who's not your husband. They've looked down upon her. They didn't have anything to do with her. And on top of that, she's a Samaritan. So in Jewish culture, she's supposed to be even less than. To be a woman who's been divorced, a Samaritan, living with someone who's not their husband, that is the epitome of how bad you could be. And Christ is standing there talking to her, saying to her, I have a gift for you. You're walking every day to this well. You're walking every day to this location. It reminds you every day of how worthless you are, of how valueless you are, of how horrible and wretched you are. But I have a water that will sustain you. I have a water that will change your life. And yeah, you'll walk this road again, but you won't walk it alone anymore. And for us, we all know that there are things in our life that we feel like disqualify us from happiness, disqualify us from God, disqualify us from friendship, disqualify us from community, disqualify us. We all have those things that in our heart, we say, if anybody knew this about me, no one would want anything to do with me. They would cast me out. They would throw me away. They would tell me that I'm worthless. And God is saying those very things are the things I'm going to use to change your eternity, to change your life forever. We heard some of these things today when we shared stories of our baptisms. Man, God, I was diagnosed with MS and I don't know what to do. I just want to be at a church somewhere. God said, I'm going to use that to change your world. God, I'm addicted to drugs. I just put my second child up for adoption. I'm going to use that to change your eternity. God, I've been clean for 21 months and I want to give you the praise and the glory for that. I'm going to use that to change your eternity. See, the reality is God is going to take those things, the things that should push us out of society, should ostracize us, should make us, not a part of any community. He's going to take them and he's going to use it to change your life. He's going to use it to change your world. He's going to use it to change things in a way you can't even imagine. He's going to interrupt the ordinary and make it extraordinary. See, a story that I can share that kind of equates to this. Not that I'm saying that these two things are the same, but I think it helps us understand what God is doing in this moment when he offers this woman this gift. When I was I was probably 12 at the time, the only thing I wanted for Christmas was an Xbox 360. That was it. That was all that I cared about. And so I asked my parents for months and months and months for an Xbox 360. And about 3 days before Christmas, my mom and I were out shopping, and she said to me, Andrew, we tried really hard this year, but we just couldn't make the Xbox happen. I know it was all you asked for, but it's just not going to be able to happen this year, and I'm really sorry. But I just want to let you know so you're not disappointed on Christmas morning. And I was like, yeah, you know what, that's fine, that makes sense. I was appreciative that they even tried. And I knew that I was going to go into Christmas not getting what I really wanted. So it was kind of going to be like an ordinary day. And so if you know my family, I had 5 younger siblings. And so I would often have to stay up and help my mom wrap presents because Christmas time was a nightmare. My mom would be up till 5 a.m. wrapping presents for all of us. And so I would stay up and I would help her wrap all the younger kids' presents so that she could get to bed, at a reasonable hour, which still ended up being 4:30 or 5, and we would wake her up at 6. So the consequence of this was that if we had our Christmas tree, all of the kids' presents were under the tree, and mine were the farthest from the tree because my mom would wrap my stuff last. So all my stuff would be as far from the tree as possible. So I'd get all my presents first in a lot of ways, but I knew where my presents ended. And so, I opened all my stuff and I got all my things. I got clothes and socks and, some of the other things I'd asked for, but most of my stuff was Xbox related, so I didn't get any of it. And so it was an ordinary day in a lot of ways. It was an ordinary Christmas. And, I was still excited. I was still happy. But as we began to approach the end of the unwrapping, I knew when mine were done, so I'm watching my siblings take all their presents and unwrap them. And I hear one of them, my little sister, say, "Hey, there's one more present under the tree. And so we look back, and it's this big box. And so they go over and they grab it, and they're like, and I expected for my siblings, but they're like, no, Andrew, it's for you. And I was like, that's weird. And so they bring me the present, and they put it down, and I open it up. Inside, there's my Xbox 360. And man, I was so excited. The ordinary became extraordinary. And not that I'm saying this is equivalent, but this Xbox, this gift that I received, is the only reason I met my best friends in high school. And one of my friends is still here serving at church with me today. Because an ordinary day became extraordinary in that moment. How much greater is his gift? If I'm excited about an Xbox, how much greater is the gift he has for us when we meet him at the well. We meet him at the source of our shame, at the source of where we're reminded that we're not good enough. It's right there that he says to us, it doesn't matter what you've done, it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter where you've come from. I have a gift for you that's going to change eternity, not only for you, but for your community, for your family, for all the people around you. I have that. I have that living water. And all you have to do is ask. We're about to go into a reflection minute. And as we sit here for about a minute and we begin to think and we begin to pray, we say, God, where is it you're trying to meet me? Where is my source of shame? Where's my source of I'm not good enough? Where's my source of I need something more? What am I trying to fill these voids with? What am I trying to fix, my anger issues? What am I trying to fix my depression? What am I trying to fix my drug addiction? What am I trying to fix my alcoholism with? What is it that is my greatest source of shame? What is it that's the thing that's ostracizing me from my community? God, take it and turn it into something good. Make my ordinary extraordinary. Today is not just an ordinary day at church for you. Today is an extraordinary encounter with God. Today can be something greater than you ever imagined. And all you have to do is sit there and say, God, I want whatever it is that you have to offer. I don't want the next best thing. I want the greatest thing. From the beginning of time to eternity's end, you are something more. You are something that will sustain me. You will give me life when all else has failed, when every program I've tried, when everything else is not good enough. You will say to me, you are enough. I want the gift you have for me. I want the living water. If you bow your heads with me, God, we come before you and we just ask that you turn today into an extraordinary day. Don't let it be ordinary. Come interrupt our lives. Come remind us that you have a gift for us, and it doesn't matter what we've done, where we've been, who we are. All that matters is that you love us. God, we thank you for everything you're doing in our lives, all the ways you're changing us. We thank you for the stories that have yet to be told. In your name we pray, amen. We're going to do about 1 minute of reflection. Just talk to God. Ask him what ordinary thing needs to become an extraordinary moment.